Okay, so good morning everyone. Today we'll be talking about from the rubric connotation, the impact political acts may have on individual lives or society more broadly. And throughout this presentation we'll be making reference to Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. So the key area that I'll be talking about today is John's attempt to throw away the Soma as a stand against the political or social structure in Brave New World. His actions and his political stand did not have as much of an impact on the society, but more on the individuals, including himself, and as well as Helmholtz, as Helmholtz also agrees and helps John attempt to throw away the Soma. John states, "I'll teach you, I'll make you be free whether you want it or not." This quote is almost as if it's contradicting, John is contradicting himself, because John is what he believes attempting to free the Deltas, yet when he states whether you want it or not, he's enforcing the freedom on them. And it really poses the question, is John really freeing the Deltas, or do the Deltas believe that they are already free based on the way the social structure is worked out? John does not understand that the way the social structure works in Brave New World is that it's cemented in place and that it cannot be changed. The individual acts may not have such an influence unless it is done by a greater amount of people, or unless it really makes a stand in Brave New World. Also, there is a conversation between John and Musulman that talks about his removal from the world state, where John, his emotions trigger when he says his need for a God is that when you're quite alone at night in the dark thinking about death. John does not understand that there is no need for a God in the world state, and that with Mustafa Mon stating, well, God manifests himself as an absence as though he weren't there at all. The idea of a presence of a God or a deity in the world state would seem ridiculous, that as the people would not be able to understand and comprehend this. John being left from the world state as well, being led to his isolation, almost led to his inability to finally live in the Brave New World, with his ultimately leading in his suicide as his feet turns towards the right, north, northeast, south, and so on. So it kind of shows that his attempt to stand up politically as an individual, not only, it didn't have much of an effect on the society, but more so on himself. Probably a greater impact on himself, which then, yeah, of course, led to his suicide.
We're going to talk about how conditioning and the social class system works. Firstly, the introduction of conditioning to a broader society introduced a lack of humanization and human behavior amongst the individuals in the Brave New World. Firstly, it removed all the general emotional feelings that are associated normally with the human, including love. This is seen by the director on page 132. He glared at him in agony and bewildered humiliation, which is a perfect example of how, even though John was his son, the emotion that is associated with love, etc., has been forwarded out of the people in the society. The emotion of love is very important to how the normal human body works, and as shown through the passion treatments, which are given later in the book. And also it removes what we consider to be normal, including the outlook of nature. From a young age, they were taught to fear flowers and books, which means in terms of knowledge and nature. In this case, a quote from page 17, "At the sight of Baba and cockle-doodle-doo, the infants shrank away in horror." So this is a perfect example of how it is associated, the whole idea is associated with conditioning, how there is nothing but what the world state believes. Also, they do it through the Bobanowskian process from page 5, 96 edition, identical twins working in 96 identical machines. This shows how they become robotic thinkers. They only think the way of the state, and since they're 96 identical individuals, they all follow the same method over and over again, and there is no discrepancy since they are exactly identical. Also, through the Bobanowskian process, they're able to create a social class which limits the power and control of each individual by how they are taught and what class they're in. So this is done through obviously conditioning and the process. So you'll find that they blurt out phrases like "I'm glad I'm not a gamma" from page 22, or and the alphas are constantly talking about the lower classes. In this case, from Bernard, epsilon minus semi-morons, he constantly calls them, as they are lower to them, and that's how they're taught. So that's the common reaction without any influence of their own.
So the main political impact within Brave New World could obviously be seen as the conditioning by the world state. However, you cannot really look at conditioning as a whole without sort of breaking it down to sort of minor parts and see how they all work together to impact on individual lives or society. The first main part will be the removal of monogamy. Monogamy is sort of like a family unit and should only be married or attached to one person. This is easily seen in the quote by Fanny on page 34, which is, "It's such horribly bad form to go on and on like this with one man." It's also continued with Mustafa Mond on page 30 saying, "Try to imagine what living with one's family meant." The issue isn't that they have limited monogamy, it's that they've removed the idea of it altogether. The fact that Mustafa Mond is talking to the children near the beginning of the novel and saying to try and imagine what it was simply means that they have no idea what it was in the first place. They haven't limited it, they've simply gotten rid of it. He continues on by saying, "Mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, but there were also husbands, wives and lovers. There was also monogamy and romance, though you probably don't know what these are," which just further illustrates how they haven't limited it, they've removed all these ideas. The impact that this has had on society as a whole is that it's gotten rid of this family unit. It's made it so all their love and devotion has gone towards the world state and society as a whole. However, we can see an impact on an individual through the response to this kind of idea by John. In the beginning, when he first meets Lenina, he compares her in chapter 9 to Juliet, sort of someone that needs to be proven to. Where when he figures out that she's just conforming to these ideas of against monogamy, he calls her quite the opposite, quite simply a whore and a strumpet. The second point would be the different treatment of death or how it is approached. On page 178, when John is sitting in the hospital watching Linda die, he sees children come in, and the quote was, "Disgraceful, what do you mean there being death conditioned?" So the removal of death has been taught from the beginning as the removal of monogamy. By removing the mourning of a person's death, the world state removes the need for an individual to have any emotional feeling between one another. It removes the idea that you should be attached to an individual, much like monogamy. This is further illustrated and enforced in the enforcement of the classes. As Joey kind of illustrated before, they kind of hate classes below them, but they know where they sit. They don't see each other as individuals, they see them as either epsilons to alphas. This is also illustrated in Mustafa Mond on page 97, where it says the optimum population is modelled on the iceberg, 8/9 below the waterline, 1/9 above. The last thing is you can't really remove an individual by just putting them into classes. You need to remove their individual thought. This is clearly done by the removal of literature near the end of the book, where it is explained by Mustafa Mond that because our world is not the same as Othello's world, you can't make flivvers without steel, and you can't make tragedies without social instability. The reason why they can't teach them literature, or grand literature as John sees it, like Shakespeare's works, particularly in this case Othello, is because the teaching of literature works like Othello would require the need for teaching of social instability in order for it to be understood, which would give people ideas of a society other than their own. The reason why it's removed is so that they feel like there's only one way to conform to society, there's no alternative. By the removal of these teachings, it stops individuals from going against the world state as there is no alternative, which impacts society as a whole as there is only one way to follow. This impacts society as a whole as it only gives them one path, there is no choice. And it makes them move as a group and as a class rather than individually.